Thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring this week's show. For $30 off your first week of HelloFresh, visit HelloFresh.com and enter Hawkers30 at checkout. HelloFresh.com and enter HAWKERS30 for $30 off your first week.
Welcome to the Seahawkers podcast with your hosts, Adam Emmert.
I want Doug Baldwin to just run up to me and just give me the Baldwin stare of encouragement. That'd be very inspiring.
And Brandan Schultz.
I could have sworn that there was some sort of rules test that needed to be passed to have a podcast about football.
Go Hawks!
On a quest to own the West, yippee-ki-yay, we make the ground shake. On game day, 12 man, yeah, he's feeling it is vital. The Seahawks coming to take division titles.
This is episode 171 of the Seahawkers podcast. I'm Brandan Schultz of the Military Seahawkers, and joining me, my good buddy and Montana Seahawker, Adam Emmert.
What I promise all of you listeners today is we will not have a slow start to the podcast. We're coming out ready to go. There's lots to talk about this week, and it's after a win.
I know.
Yeah, and granted, it wasn't the prettiest win. Okay, it was downright ugly. Right, it was dreadful, but it was a win. It was a win. 12 points. Win.
12 points. It's a win. We are leading the NFC West, or in a tie with the NFC West, but I think we get the tiebreaker because we beat a divisional opponent. So I'm going to say we are leading the NFC West. And Adam's right. We're going to fire off this week because we have a lot to talk about. We have a running back crew now that we have to talk about because there might be a shakeup in terms of this depth chart now after this last game.
Okay.
I have a beef with a rule snob on Twitter, or maybe several rule snobs on Twitter. We'll get into that.
All right. Just you can't ever have. There's no such thing as a Twitter beef.
I have a beef. Whenever it's a problem with somebody on Twitter, it's a beef.
Why isn't it a Twitter pork? There are other meats.
I have a problem with rule snobs on Twitter.
There we go. That's better. Yeah, that whole phrase Twitter beef is stupid.
We'll get rid of that. You're right. It is dumb.
Okay.
But we also have to talk about what the Seahawks need to do this week to beat the Titans on their home turf. And we're going to get into it more than just saying that they need to score more points.
Oh, well, but they need to score more points.
They do need to score more points.
Okay.
And we're going to talk to Samuel Gold of NFL Draft Breakdowns and Field Goals and get a little bit of his thoughts on a couple of issues with the Seahawks offense. In particular, Adam, I'm going to talk to him about the need to run the bubble screen all the time. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about the zone read because he was on board, like you were, that the Seahawks needed to do more zone read going into this week. And guess what? We saw it, and they ran it well against the Niners.
Well, good. I'm glad that Sam happened to agree with me on that. I'm really stoked that you were able to have a conversation with him. I'm bummed I didn't get to join that. I really look forward to listening to what you guys get into. That's for sure.
Well, let's get right into this win against the Niners. 8 straight wins against the Niners, and now we've sat through 8 really difficult quarters to watch so far this season.
With only 1 touchdown. In case any of you guys are keeping track at home, Jermaine Kearse has 2 touchdowns this year. The entire Seattle Seahawks offense won. And that was the guy we had to get rid of, remember?
Yeah.
Had to get him out of town as fast as possible.
Yeah, just let that sink in a little bit. Thanks, Adam.
On the Jets.
Jermaine Kearse on the Jets has more touchdowns than the entire Seahawks offense.
That's tough.
I thought we were going to start this on a positive note. This seems like a real downer.
I said nothing about positivity. I just said that we weren't going to be off to a slow start. I can be off to a negative start and have it be at a fast pace. It's a hurry up negative start. That's what I'm doing here. I'm going to hurry up negative offense. Well, these guys suck. We're doomed forever. This offensive line can't ever play. And just pack it up. I'm done with this season. End of podcast.
End of podcast.
See how fast that was?
That was probably the fastest podcast we've ever done.
Yeah.
And with that,
there's only one thing left to say. I'm full of catfish.
Let's start off with the offense, though, because the effectiveness of the offense is the issue right now. And after the first couple of drives, though, I started to trick myself into thinking, we're not converting in the red zone, but we are able to drive the field and kick field goals. And if we can just do this and operate this way all day long, it won't matter. But then after we got 6 points on the board, we stopped moving the ball.
Yeah, it did slow down a little bit. They picked it back up. Look, one thing that, as we look back at this game, everybody the frustration level was so high throughout the game. I think for every single Seahawks fan, me included. But let's look at some baby steps because I don't want to be Captain Negative all day. They did convert a fair amount of third downs, and they did possess the ball for a hell of a long time that first half. They dominated time of possession. And that's one of the ways that you're able to keep the defense fresh so that you don't allow the 49ers to score a touchdown, so you can win a game only scoring one touchdown. All those things were important, and those were some small successes. So if you're looking for anything to look at other than Tyler Lockett and Chris Carson as a positive, they did a lot better on third downs. There was improvement there.
Third down was probably the biggest area of improvement, and you saw with the 49ers, with them being unable to convert their third down opportunities, you saw how it really limited them in the game. What it came down to for the 49ers was two big run plays that allowed them to put field goals up on the board to stay in the game, and the Seahawks' inability to catch the ball in the end zone. It was those two things that kept this game really close the entire time. When you watch the Seahawks offense operate and you watch the 49ers offense operate, Hoyer didn't even get 100 yards. He didn't even throw for 100 yards on the day. So you could see how difficult of time the 49ers were having with the Seahawks defense. The drops were such a difference maker in the final score of the game.
The drops made a huge difference. Also, Russell Wilson's play up until the last few minutes of the game made a huge difference in the minus category. I'll just say it. He sucked for most of the game.
It was a tough game for Russell, yeah.
He wasn't helped out by some of the drops, but his accuracy was all over the place. His decision-making was questionable. There is at least 3 balls that I can think of that had a legitimate chance of being picked off. One in particular where if it weren't for the Niners playing defense against themselves, that's a pick for sure. He really struggled, and we've all seen it throughout the course of his career. When he misses and when he's off, he misses high. And he struggled with that mightily throughout a large portion of this game. That was super frustrating to watch. This was a collective effort. The struggles of the offense, week 1, you could definitely just look back on everything and it was super easy to be like one of those investigators on TV that puts all the pictures of suspects on the board and links them all back with yarn and red yarn, and all comes back to one spot. And it was the offensive line. It was just like, bonk. That was the issue for everything right there. Right. But in this case, this week, this was a collective effort across the board when it came to the offense because the offensive line played marginally better.
Well, there were some positives in this game, and I want to move on to those because Gary in Aiken, South Carolina says, I did see some positives yesterday in regards to the offense. The Seahawks ran 79 plays to the Niners 48. Hawks controlled the ball 37 minutes to 23 minutes for the Niners. The Hawks were able to close the game out on offense, picking up first downs with smash mouth running.
Ding! That's a huge point.
The 49ers were gassed. I know they're not a powerhouse by any means, and our pass blocking is hot garbage, but it seems like a long time since I've last seen the Hawks have the ball with the lead with 4+ minutes left and be able to drive and kill the clock. And I thought that was an excellent point by Gary because, yes, it happened one time last season. One time where the Seahawks had the ball with 4 minutes left and they were able to close out the game. And it was against the 49ers. But yes, this is going to be something that you want to see consistently out of this team. Don't bring the defense back on the field. Stay out there with the offense. Close the game out by just pounding the football. And Chris Carson seems like the guy to do that.
Boy, Chris Carson really did have a great showing this week. He basically looked at Thomas Rawls and said, "You're not coming back on the field. I'm doing this." And boy, what a revelation in the sense that he went out there. He runs with power. He runs with creativity. I think that's one of my favorite things about watching him run right now. He understands that the called play isn't going to often be there, or even the called cutback isn't going to often be there. You got to figure it out on the fly. And he's a quick thinker, and he's able to do that. One of the things I found really interesting, Sports Info Solutions came out with their broken tackle leaders, and you have to have a minimum of 10 attempts. Chris Carson is at number 1 with 57.7% of his tackles being broken. The next highest is Jonathan Stewart at 33.3. That's a huge gap. That shows you just how effective Chris Carson has been at breaking tackles and being that physical runner that they hoped Eddie Lacy would be. So fortunately, we were able to hit on a guy late. And kind of like I said with the Lacy signing, you can find running backs anywhere. Like you can find them anywhere. And you poo-pooed that. And we have Chris Carson. And what a revelation. I thought he played a whale of a game, and the idea that we could just go ahead and run the clock out, give the offensive line credit because they did do their job in that situation. Sure, the Niners defense was tired, but you still have to wear them down all game to get there. So give the offensive line some credit. They were opening up some holes in the run game at the end. And my favorite moment, Brandon, just real quick, during that series, as Chris Carson's running the clock out, Baldwin just comes running up to him, just stands right in front of him, and just stares at him. Just gives him the Baldwin stare.
Yeah.
Because he's just loving what he's doing. I want Doug Baldwin to just run up to me and just give me the Baldwin stare of encouragement. Like that'd be very inspiring.
That's how you know. That's how you know you have Baldwin's respect, is you get the Baldwin stare.
You just ran up to him, just stared at him. Like, what do you even say back?
And he Baldwin talked about all preseason that he thought Carson was a guy that, he was the real deal. And you could see it on plays like this, where, as you mentioned, Carson's breaking some tackles.
Here's the handoff inside to Carson over his left guard. Breaks one tackle, breaks two tackles, spins out of another. Inside the 45 of San Francisco goes Chris Carson. And just like that, not a big hole there, but a little bit of a crease. And Carson found it for 14.
And that's what we needed out of the run game this week. You mentioned Thomas Rawls. It sounded like going into this game, I may have hyped up Thomas Rawls in our previous show a little too much, knowing the way Pete Carroll likes to slowly work guys back in after injury. It sounded like he only had about 15 snaps planned for Rawls going into this game. We saw he only got 4 or 5 carries, but it was on those 4 or 5 carries where he looked very tentative. And it was a big difference between watching Rawls run and watching Carson run. And because he was able to you saw him make those decisions, commit to it, and run toward the hole or run into the line if he saw that nothing was there. And I know Brandan from San Diego recognized it because he has the new running back depth chart out, and it says okay. Chris Carson number 1, Chris Carson number 2, and Chris Carson number 3.
No Thomas Rawls, huh?
No Thomas Rawls on that one.
But I can see where he drew inspiration.
But I think we're gonna see. I think we're gonna see more Rawls.
Yeah, I think we'll see them split carries. One thing and I can't remember who mentioned it in the Ring of Honor during the game, but I think they were spot on. It seemed like Rawls was having some footing issues.
Yeah.
Like maybe he just had it on the wrong foot gear, man. Like Turf Monster got him once. No blocking from the guards got him a couple times. So I don't know, like saying that Rawls wasn't effective or couldn't be effective is tough for me to go down that road at this point. But thank goodness for Chris Carson, man. I mean, he really is a breath of fresh air. I think that's some of the life that the Seahawks team needs, and give him the ball. I love it.
Other guy getting the ball, another rookie showing up in this game, Amara Darboh getting his first reception as a Seahawk.
Russell in the offense right back to the line of scrimmage, a 3-man rush. Russell's going to fire down the slot. Ball is caught down to the 21-yard line. Amara Darboh, the rookie, getting onto the field, into his position, and makes a big 17-yard reception for a first down. The sticks move. It's 1st and 10, and the Seahawks are still alive with the ball at the San Francisco 21.
So a big 3rd down conversion with going to Darboh. That was fun to see. And he didn't drop it like a couple other receivers that we saw.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Boy, McAvoy he crapped the bed this week.
Yeah. 2 passes off of his hands. That was tough.
That's the other thing about the offense and how much I score or didn't score. The points were there to be had. I would have a hard time believing that the receivers, whether that's CJ Procise or McAvoy, are going to not come through with those sort of opportunities again. Like I would feel like they would convert.
And Carroll talked about it a little bit. He said that's not an issue that we have been seeing with those guys.
Right.
He expects them to come back and show that that's more of an anomaly than what we can expect.
So I agree with you 100% on that. My question, Brandon, and I think maybe it was Kofi Poku who asked this on the Facebook page about the idea that if this continues on for the Seahawks offense, does there come a point where it's time to shake it up and somebody's getting the hook, somebody's getting canned? Because you saw the Bengals here this last week. They went out, canned their offensive coordinator. I mean, it feels like it's in play, doesn't it?
I sense the frustration from Carroll in the press conferences in the early weeks of the season a lot more than I did in years past. And I don't know if I'm reading into things that aren't there.
Projecting your own feelings,
projecting my own feelings, maybe projecting my own feelings just a little bit.
I feel like you're right on this. I'm not gonna lie,
but I do sense a tone of frustration that I don't remember hearing in past years.
Yeah, and I think kind of the reason I bring it up is just the idea that, okay, week one, offensive line, there's really just not the talent there, and you struggle there, and that's the reason why you have a bad week. Well, this week, everybody wasn't ready.
Yeah.
Nobody was ready for this week. I mean, rather than, Tyler Lockett and Chris Carson. And thank goodness for Tyler Lockett, man. He was out there making all sorts of plays.
Hey, and Paul Richardson, too, I think needs a little bit of credit. Scoring the game-winning touchdown.
Russell takes a shotgun snap. Looks. Now he's got to scramble. Now he looks straight ahead. Still scrambling. Moves to the left side. Throws to the end zone. It's caught. Is he in? He is. Touchdown! Seahawks! It's Paul Richardson on the far side, and Russell made it happen with his feet. How he got rid of the ball and found Richardson, I have no idea, on the far side of the end zone. But Rich came back and gave him a target, and Russell found it.
Now, you're going to be shocked to learn that Paul Richardson got injured during this game, but it was also an incredible amount of toughness for him to come back into the game, because listening to Doug Baldwin in an interview on KJR after the game, he said that, and the way Doug Baldwin put this, he said that Richardson had a dislocated finger, but then he described the bone protruding from the skin and bleeding. Mm-hmm. And that's a little bit more than a dislocation. That's compound fracture of a finger.
Well, if the finger just dislocates from the joint, but it then pops through, that's not a fracture at all. It's still a dislocation, accurately described. Maybe it's a compound dislocation.
A compound dislocation. I've never heard that before, but maybe we can.
You heard it here first, I think.
But just to show that kind of toughness, to get back in there, and we saw it in the preseason, right, with his shoulder issue, coming back the very next week and playing. So maybe in the past where we've seen Richardson get injured, now we're starting to see some of the toughness that he can show to stay in the game now and really make a difference like he did toward the end of the game.
Yeah, I think he feels the urgency in the sense that the Seahawks are fed up with I'm hurt all the time thing. So he knows he's got to be out there, and I hats off to him, no doubt about it. But it did take basically an act of football gods to score a touchdown finally. I mean, some Houdini stuff out of Russell Wilson. And so what I was kind of getting at earlier with nobody really being prepared for this game, that's a reflection on the offensive coaching staff at the end of the day. That against a team like the 49ers who they've got a little bit of talent up front. I mean, their defense isn't devoid of talent, but you should run them up and down the field a bit. And it was a gigantic struggle. And if that continues, man, it doesn't look good. Somebody's losing their job. I don't know who it would be.
We should not have to count on the Seahawks defense to hold an opponent under 10 points week to week just to have the potential to win. Especially when they're taking scores off the board, like our safety that it looked like we had Brian Hoyer getting sacked and driven back into the end zone. And I thought we had two there, Adam.
I thought we did too. Apparently, I don't understand the rule completely, because when I see a quarterback get sacked out, say at the 40-yard line, like wherever the defender starts to wrap him up isn't where they spot the ball. They spot the ball wherever the guy hits the turf.
Yeah.
Like that's how a sack works. But apparently not in close to the end zone. If you get some sort of forward progress or something, boy, it just in real time, that just looked like a safety. That just looked every bit of what a safety should be.
No, it looked clearly like a safety. And even on the replay, you saw as he was getting hit, Hoyer had his back foot on the goal line. and I couldn't tell exactly where the ball was, but I could see that his foot was standing on the goal line. And my favorite tweet from this game was when I got a little upset about the fact that they didn't count it as a safety, and somebody responded with, "You have a podcast about football and you don't know the rules?"
Wow.
That was entertaining to me.
No, here's the thing. I don't know all of the rules at all the time. There's some that to this day I still don't quite understand. It's funny too, Brandon. I mean, I hear players who play the game. They don't just have a podcast about football say, well, I guess I don't know what a catch is. I don't know what a fumble is. I didn't know that, the ball goes out. Yeah, that I couldn't bat the ball out the back of the end zone, that would be a penalty. Turns out the players don't even know all the rules. Sometimes the coaches don't even know all the rules. But how dare you?
How dare I? I could have sworn that there was some sort of rules test that needed to be passed to have a podcast about football. I don't know how that happens.
No, it is harder to get a ham radio license than it is to start a podcast by like a lot.
Yeah.
There's like training, things you have to do. You need certified. Nah, they just let any numbnut from Montana get on the microphone and start this sort of thing. Proof's in the pudding right here.
And I don't understand how rule snobs have to just rain on our parade during a game, because can I just be mad and irrational for just a few minutes without you telling me, well, according to section 2A of the NFL rule book, the ball is spotted at the point of where the player is holding the ball and going down, and the ball must be fully outside of the end zone to not be a safety. I don't care about all that. It looked like a safety to me. Let me consider the fact that I think points just got taken off the board and leave me alone.
Look, if there's a place in this world to put your irrational anger and all that, where you can be irrational and just have fun with it,
it's Twitter.
This is it. Like, football is where it's at. Like, that's where you do it. You don't put it in politics. You don't put it in your own personal relationships, and just your regular life. No, this is a healthy place to do that. This is the same guy, Brandan, who was a hall monitor in high school and would stop you in the hall. Like, you got a pass to go get something out of your locker and you took a piss along the way too. And he'd be like, "Can I see your pass, please?" And you hand him a blue pass. He's like, "Oh, well, if you had to go to the restroom, you needed a pink pass. So this isn't going to work." And ends up getting you detention because he's a joyless, lifeless, terrible, soulless human being. That's who that is.
Yes.
Rule snobs.
Rule snobs, leave me alone. Let me enjoy the game and enjoy my frustration without breaking down everything that it takes joy out of watching it for me.
That guy must sleep with, Dean Blandino playing in the background. Like, that's probably how he goes to sleep, explaining rules.
Tune into the Rules podcast each week, where we read 5 pages from the NFL rulebook.
Right.
It'll happen. Watch it.
Oh, man. I want to go back to the offensive line just a little bit, because I think they got unnecessarily killed in this game by the fans. Not that they were good, but they were at least better than the week before. They not quite as many jailbreaks, right at the quarterback. I think half of the problem is with this. I mean, one of the other topics we just hit on was Russell Wilson kind of sucking on Sunday. I'm really worried about Russell's mental capacity as a quarterback right now, his mental health as a quarterback. I really see David Carr disease starting to creep in. I mean, he is so skittish in the pocket, and it's starting to lead to some bad decision making. I'm terrified that you go through another season of this and you could potentially ruin a franchise guy. I mean, season after season of this, there comes a point where it affects you completely. And I'm genuinely concerned.
Well, I think you see the difference on some of those plays where he does his spin move to try and get out of the pocket, and then he realizes that there's nowhere to go because the tackles have pushed their guys behind him now.
Right.
And he doesn't have that way to escape necessarily the way that he did in previous years.
Well, the guards aren't necessarily getting just knocked on their butt every single play. No. I mean, a lot of these plays where Russell starts to scramble and he looks really skittish, that the interior of the line, for the most part, has done their job. His eyes are starting to drop a lot earlier in the progression of reads, down to the offensive line. It's just starting to affect him. And it does worry me a ton, much like, David pointed out in his comment, Angela Koski-Earl on the Facebook Ring of Honor said something to the same effect, where it looked like Russell was trying to play within the confines of the office for the majority of the game. And then finally, by the time he got to the end of the game, was just like, screw it, I'm doing it my way, and just started running around and doing stuff. And we're going to have to rely on that randomness of Russell Wilson just doing Russell Wilson things, because unless the receivers start to pull it together and start getting a little more separation more consistently and start catching the freaking ball a little more consistently, I think Jimmy Graham's a big culprit in that. Not so much with the drops, but where's his head right now?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what he's doing out there right now. I just don't see enough consistency around Russell Wilson to be able to play on rhythm in a consistent way in the offense. So we're just going to have to rely on running around and throwing things up.
Now, one of the arguments is, okay, hey, this is the Seahawks. They've started slow in the past. This is just another year of starting slow. You know, last year scored 12 points against the Dolphins, only 3 points against the Rams down in LA last year. So we've seen them get off to slow starts and then start to pick it up as they get later on in the season. You know, it was the 49ers last year in that game, the third game of the season, where they came back home and it looked like the Seahawks again, even with Russell Wilson hampered by injury.
Yeah, Carolina in 2013, you know, there was a 12-point win for the Seahawks.
Early on in the year, right? Yeah. So I have to wonder if Pete Carroll's mentality as a whole, you know, always willing to put guys out there that maybe aren't ready to be out there at the beginning of the season, but you know they're going, by the end of the season, they're going to be clicking. And we've seen them toy with the offensive line before they finally kind of get it settled. Do you think that they're done? I feel like there's moves to be made on the offensive line, whether it's Glowinski and Ibushi. I don't know if those guys are a huge difference, whether it's, you know, Ifedi or Posick at the right tackle position, whether or not you could flip flop Luke Jokel and Odiombo. A lot of people thinking that Odiombo would be a better guard than a tackle, and to where you could make it enough of improvement by adjustments like that.
You're playing with fire when you start doing those things, because like you were saying, Brandon, the idea, play them early when maybe they're not quite ready. And by the time the end of the year comes around, they've had enough reps. They feel comfortable. They feel good about themselves. The offense finds a rhythm and you're ready to go come time the playoffs start. That's a really cool idea. But like I said, you're playing with fire, because it only takes 4 or 5 games in a row of monumental struggles where maybe you're not seeing the improvement in your own game that you thought you should at this point, where you start to get beat down and you start to feel negatively about your own play, that you break mentally as a player. Like there is a very real possibility that a team can spiral the other direction. It's a tightrope walk here, and Pete Carroll's done this many, many years. And it's really frustrating, because then he comes out and he, you know, has the statements that he has regarding the offensive line that just drive me bonkers, man.
You know, we still have, you know, Reese is a first-time starter and goes on his first goal on the other side. Unfortunately, Fetty's at the right tackle. You know, so unfortunately, there's a little bit of newness you can see, and so we're going to get better. And the games are harder than in regular season than they are in preseason, but I think we can see us making the improvement that's going to be important for us.
I think it was a slip of the tongue when he said, unfortunately, Ifedi's the right tackle, but I want to believe that it was just a slip.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. My problem is the choice of word, unfortunately. This is what really just aggravates me to no end. Unfortunately implies that there's some sort of fortune that has gone against you in this that has made it so it just hasn't quite worked out. Well, Reese Odiombo, unfortunately, is a first-time starter. Mark Glowinski is unfortunately on the other side for the first time. Unfortunately, you know, Ifedi is struggling at right tackle. No. None of this had anything to do with fortune. This was all within your control. You could have done very finite things to change this entire situation if you would have put the time, the resources, and attention into it. Freaking own it.
One positive was when it came time for Russell Wilson to really make it happen, get the job done when he needed to. That's when he made it work. And David in Florence, South Carolina, posted on Facebook, said that was ugly. But I'll tell you what I saw that makes me believe During the Super Bowl runs, when nothing was going our way, Russell put the team on his shoulders and started making things happen with his feet. It's kind of like the movie Major League, where Serrano says, "Catfish! You, Joe Boo, I'll do it myself," then hits a huge home run. That's what Russ did on that last drive, and that's what I saw him do during the Super Bowl runs. He breaks out and goes for every yard he can, even if he has to dive head first. I saw that in the first time in a while today. It wasn't pretty, but I believe they're going to pull this all together, contingent on replacing Glowinski, of course.
That's the one you single out on that offensive line. That's interesting. I mean, not that you're wrong 100% at all, but just out of all of them, the Glowinski's the first one you point to. Who knows, man? I mean, I think you could pick about anybody but Britt.
Right, just spin the bottle around and whoever it lands on, that's...
Yeah, I mean, so whichever offensive lineman irks you the most and piques your ire the most, that's fine. Maybe we could have a poll. Maybe we could have a poll on SeahawkersPodcast.com, like which of the offensive linemen just pisses you off the most. There's no right or wrong answer. Just whatever, you don't even have to have any facts, logic, or reason. Just the guy that pisses you off the most. I think that'd be a fun poll.
Oh, who would I pick? That's a tough call. It might be Glowinski. Or it might be Jokel, because that's the guy that is making the most money.
That's the part that pisses you off, is the money end aspect of it. It doesn't matter. I mean, like I said, there's no wrong answer.
Yeah, there's no wrong answer. And I got to thinking about offensive line today because was on Knock on Sports talking about, and we were talking about this off air. Anthony asked me, what would you give to have your left tackle, Russell Okung, back on the Seahawks? And you look at Russell Okun's salary, $12.5 million, versus Reese Odiambo's salary, which is about $12 million less.
Right.
And you get to thinking, okay, would I like to have Richard Sherman on this team with Reese Odiambo, or would I take a pretty average left tackle and not have a top caliber corner? And when you start putting it in that kind of perspective, you see why this team skimps on the offensive line the way it has.
Sure, but everybody paints it as that either or option. Well, either you can have a guy or you can't have Richard Sherman.
You can't have both, Adam. Don't say you can have both.
You can actually have both. You can have somebody like Mike Remmers and Richard Sherman at the same time. You can do that. There's just things you have to do instead, like not pay Eddie Lacy a bunch of money for no catfish reason.
Well, and Eddie Lacy inactive this week. A healthy scratch. And here's Coach Carroll saying why they did that.
It's really unfortunate that we had to make that move because I had one Eddie playing, but we did it to make sure that we would get Thomas up and a couple of things that we were concerned about. So it's we'll see. Each week is a new story for us.
Doesn't sound a lot of confidence that he's going to be back out there when you have two running backs that are inactive week to week.
Yeah, I think it's a stretch that we see him, maybe with an injury. Maybe if Thomas Rawls goes out there and gets injured again, then you'd see him called up. I can't see him on the roster for the rest of the season.
Other than the fact that his salary is guaranteed, he's not going to reach his incentives likely because his first incentive is at like 800 yards. And he doesn't get his game bonuses if he's on the inactive list. So it's kind of like having him as a reserve bench player that you can go to, almost like Alex Collins was toward the end of last season, where we started seeing more Alex Collins with Thomas Rawls down for injury and Christian Michael after he got traded.
Right.
Or released.
Yeah, and in that case, Alex Collins costs a quarter as much. And I think you got about the same guy. But
you have Mike Davis on the practice squad who might end up being more effective.
Right. One last thing on the Niners I wanted to touch on was the defense, since we didn't talk about it at all. Defense was phenomenal. Bobby Wagner basically scored us 3 points just on his own with his interception. That was an awesome play.
Brian Hoyer out of his shotgun, empty backfield. Takes the snap, looks down the middle, it's intercepted. Bobby Wagner at the 40. He is hit, he fumbles. The Seahawks recover the ball at the 36. It's Seahawks ball. The first takeaway of the game as Richard Sherman recovers the fumble. Bobby Wagner picks it off, and the Seahawks are in business.
I appreciate Bobby Wagner keeping pace with Luke Kuechly with Hoyer interceptions, because Hoyer did that last week against the Panthers. And hearing Richard Sherman in that play coming up with the fumble, I think we need to give some credit to Richard Sherman for getting on the field in this game. Pete Carroll called him out as a fact that he didn't, most guys with his type of injury would not have played in this game. And Sherman continues to get on the field, even when he's hurt, and a pretty incredible streak that he has going on as a Seahawks player.
It really is amazing. There are some human beings, and I am not among these people, that have the ability to just mentally block out pain, like from wherever it's coming, and just go out and just perform.
Right.
Like they literally can flip a switch in their own head and just problem solved. I'm going to go out there and play. And Richard Sherman, God bless his heart, is one of those guys. I'm sure that the injury is significant. I am not worried about it in any way, shape, or form. None.
Because it's Richard Sherman.
Right.
He's shown over the past that we have no reason to doubt the fact that he's going to get on the field on Sunday, just like Russell Wilson showed us last year when he had his injury.
Right. Not only get on the field, but to perform.
Yeah.
Like to be Richard Sherman. And he absolutely was. The whole defense was. The whole passing defense, man, they smothered the 49ers. Absolutely smothered them. There was nothing going on there, which isn't wholly surprising. But I had a little message to the entire fan base of Seahawks fans here who have been wringing their hands since the closing of the game about how much Carlos Hyde chewed us up on the ground. Stop it, man. Did you not watch the game?
It's two
plays.
plays.
120 odd some yards, and he got half of that on one run.
Right.
And another like third of that on one other. But really, just one run. Sometimes you just bust one. Give me a break. Yeah, there was nowhere for him to go more times than not. He gets one big run, and suddenly we got gashed this game. Stop it.
And I think that leads in nicely to this next game against Tennessee, because they are such a running team. And if you're going to the game, remember, Seahawkerspodcast.com/tickets. It'll take you to Ticket Network if you want to get tickets for the game. But let's talk Titans, because up against the Jaguars defense that really had an outstanding first week, they went on the road against a defense that I still think, even despite the fact that they dropped off a little bit from week 1 to week 2, I still think the Jaguars defense is going to be top 10 in the NFL come the end of the season. And they didn't do much against them in the first half, but they came out in the second half and they were able to pound the ball against that Jaguars defensive line.
They were also helped out by, 3 turnovers by the Jags?
Yeah,
something like that.
That helped too.
That makes a big difference because that game was pretty close up through halftime. I watched the Titans play a lot against the Raiders in week 1, and Mariota looked sharp. That running game looked effective. Their defense looked pretty solid. This is a good team, and you're playing them at home. It's their second game at home this year. I can't see the Titans getting that run game going the way that a lot of people seem to predict, especially all the experts, online that you see that are picking this game. They're like, oh, well, the Seahawks got gashed on the ground last week, so they're going to get gashed this week. Well, first off, see previous statement. And second off, this team, when you go up against a run-first team, the Seahawks are always more than up to the challenge. I think they'll stuff the run game, although I really hope that Mularkey is very stubborn in the fact that he's going to make DeMarco Murray his starter and keep Henry on the bench. Derrick Henry, I think, is the better back right now. He definitely scares me more than DeMarco Murray, but I just can't see that getting going, that run game. Do you, Brandon?
Did you call this a run-first team? A run-first team?
The Titans?
When you talk about the Titans, you don't say run-first team. You say this is exotic smashmouth football.
Oh, right. With all of their players that specialize in short area quickness.
It's exotic smashmouth. That's what you have. That's the term you have to use when you're talking about the Titans.
I forgot. I remember the memo we got from the NFL at the beginning of the season, like the media memo.
Right. Like you don't call Mitch Trubisky Mitch. He's Mitchell now.
He's Mitchell.
And when you refer to the Tennessee Titans style of offensive football, you say exotic smashmouth. I think those were the only 2 things on the memo. That,
and you cannot say anything disparaging about Tom Brady at any given point. He's not old. He's well-aged, I think is what it said. Something like that.
The more of the backhanded compliments.
Right.
That must have been in the fine print. I don't remember that one. But Exotic Smashmouth is something that that listeners of our show are going to hear a lot during this week.
That's true.
I think it's important that people at least know why they coined that term with that offense. And because it's a big part of it is how the offense lines up and how they come off the ball, because it's difficult to kind of tell if it's a run or a pass. They might... On a pass play, the lineman might lunge forward as if it's a run, or vice versa. And it's also a run-heavy play calling type of offense.
And they do a lot of the zone read stuff too, as well with Mariota. I guess I don't really fear their the idea of handing it off to the back and them being the guys that beat you. What concerns me in this game is Mariota running around and making plays, because I could very much see the defensive line of the Seahawks, which isn't the most disciplined in the world about keeping their lanes. I mean, you see Bennett make little, I would say audibles, but I mean, he's not calling it at the line of scrimmage or anything. He's just deciding, he's freelancing, where he'll start to loop around and stunt and start going up different gaps and things like that. See a lot of that out of this defensive line, whether it's Frank Clark or Cliff Averill, they all do it. And if you do that against Marcus Mariota and the Titans, he's gone, man. He's see you later. He's definitely going to run.
Okay, Adam, you've given me a hard time in the past about pronouncing quarterback names.
Yeah.
Super blank brothers.
It's Mariota.
It's not.
Ask him.
It's Mariota.
No, it is not Mariota.
Do we need to pull it up on YouTube? I have.
What's the sauce that you put on spaghetti? That's also Italian. It's marinara. Mariota.
That totally doesn't work at all.
It absolutely works. I just made it work. See how it worked?
Marcus
all right,
Mariota.
Somebody figure it out and let us know. If somebody figures it out, let us know. I'll be happy to be wrong.
It'll take me 2 seconds to go on YouTube and pull it up.
All right. Take 2 seconds on YouTube and figure it out. In the meantime, I'm going to keep saying it. Mariota. It's going to mar your record in pronunciations when you find out that it's Mariota.
Say it for us, put it on the record.
Mariota.
Ha ha!
Mariota.
Okay, do it again.
Say it for us, put it on the record.
Mariota.
He says it kind of in between.
He doesn't say Mary.
Doesn't say Mariota either.
Say it for us, put it on the record.
Mariota.
Mariota. I'm glad we're spending time on this.
Our listeners are going to know. They're going to know when somebody's pronouncing Marcus Mariota's name incorrectly.
You just did it wrong. You just did it the way that I was doing it right there.
Not Mary, like Mario, Super Mario Brothers. Mariota.
Okay. All right.
It's okay. I'm still going to say Air Tavares.
It's the A's that get us. All right, that's fair.
It's a Montana thing.
But I'm concerned about Marcus running. That's just something to keep in mind, because I don't think that they have a lot when it comes to their pass catchers, except for most of you Seahawks fans ought to remember a name here, because this guy, he's still being a beast, man. I watched him during the Raiders game. He's a heck of a player still. Happens to play a spot that is a problem for us traditionally in coverage, Brandon. What's his name?
Delaney Walker.
I know you.
Delaney Walker is the guy that you have to be worried about at tight end for the Titans.
Yeah, man. And Mariota, he's definitely had good chemistry with him since he came into the league. It's a guy that a good tight end is a good security blanket for a young quarterback, and it's something that he's really leaned on throughout his career. And they have great connection. That's definitely somebody that you need to look at. The rest of their receivers are relatively young, a couple of rookies out there. I think that's something that we can easily handle with Earl Thomas and company, back there in area 29. I just don't see that being a huge threat, them going downfield.
No, you're right. And I think that goes back to the style of offense they run too, because they really try to hit those quick passes to avoid pressure on the quarterback. And it's played out through the stats so far this year. Mariota's the number 6 overall quarterback in not getting pressured through the first couple weeks. And not only do they have a pretty solid offensive line, they have 2 guys who were drafted in the top half of the draft at the tackle positions. So they've done well to use their draft capital when they were having some of their worst seasons as a team, got Mariota, got some help on the offensive line, and now it's helped them build the type of team that allows them to really run the ball. And, you mentioned Derrick Henry. You have a Heisman Trophy winner handing off to a Heisman Trophy winner. And then you have DeMarco Murray, too, who has also shown, and he hasn't been quite as good this first couple weeks.
Overrated.
I know you call him overrated, but when you compare him with a guy like Derrick Henry, pretty good for your offense.
No, it is. And that's why I said I hope Malarkey really does just go down that rabbit hole of making sure that Murray is the guy that gets the majority of the carries, because I think Derrick Henry is the more explosive runner. No doubt about it. But, on that side of the ball, I really feel like because of their lack of a deep threat, their lack of the ability to stretch the field, I really think you're going to see the Seahawks pack the box, get down in there. You're going to have Cam Chancellor. We haven't said a lot of Cam Chancellor's name throughout the season yet. Bam Bam Cam is going to be a huge difference maker in this game. When everybody gets up there, 8-9 guys in the box, Bam Bam is going to be the guy delivering huge blows, and he's going to be a huge difference maker in the way that this running game is shut down.
And we saw more of Bradley McDougald on the field in this last game, too, lining up with 3 safeties on the field with McDougald, Chancellor, and Thomas. Right. And I would expect that, and part of that was the packages that San Francisco tends to run. But I would think with the Titans style of football, too.
Good matchup.
It's going to be very similar.
You're onto something there. I would look to see a lot of that. Let's talk about the other side of the ball. We've been avoiding this, I can tell.
Okay.
Look, this is real simple. The Titans really have nobody in the back end that wows you.
No.
Like you look at that, and that is the weakest link on this team by far. The problem is they have a pretty darn good front four. Whether
Brian
that's Dwayne
Arakpo,
Casey,
Jarrell Casey.
Yeah,
those are the 2 guys that worry me.
Yeah, Casey's a monster. Apparently, Daquan Jones has been having a good year so far.
Yeah.
Another guy that could give us some problems there right up front. And I know a lot of people say, well, Arakpo, he's 97 years old. Well, he's still got enough talent. He's still got enough talent to make a struggling offensive line look stupid, especially in the run game. So I'm legitimately worried about how that could look on the road, because we saw the offensive line look slightly better, but that was at home. When you are on the road, that's when offensive line struggles come to rear their ugly head. Look, you might kick me off the podcast, but I think this game's going to be a loss, and I think it's going to be because of the offensive line. I think it's going to be because of the fact that the Titans have just a good enough front four to make life a living hell.
I go back to the Seahawks defense. They are going to have to keep this Titans team under 10 points for this to be a competitive game for the Seahawks. And so that means no mistakes early on in this game, because if you allow this Titans team to get up by a touchdown or 2 by halftime, you're not going to have enough time in the second half to overcome that deficit.
Not the way they're playing right now.
That's what I mean.
It doesn't seem that way.
Because guys like Jarrell Casey are going to look just like a guy like Mike Daniels looked for the Packers in week 1.
That's what I'm terrified of. So, I mean, yeah, kick me off the podcast. But
rather than kick you off the podcast, I want you to explain to me how this team is going to beat the Titans.
Well, either you need to rest Jimmy Graham completely, or you need to start splitting him out wide. Like you got to do that. Get him to where he's able to make a quick move on the slants and things like that. And Russell Wilson can just hit him as he bodies up a linebacker, because he's not blowing people away coming out of a 3-point stance. Like you got to do that. So they're keeping him in because they're struggling so much on the offensive line that they need him to help. Right, is the idea.
Right, to chip.
The other way you can help is to get out in your pattern right quick, so that Russell can go ahead and throw the ball. I think that's one thing. I think the other thing, they need to run to the edges on this Titans defense. Start that stretch zone play. That has to work. That has to work. And whether that's doing it just traditionally through the handoff or running the zone read, a heavy dose of the zone read. We finally saw it. It came up. What did they run on 4th down when they had to have it?
Yeah, zone read.
It's time. It's time to unleash that beast, man. We're going to have to devolve as an offense to survive this first 4 weeks.
But do you think a guy like Brian Arakpo, who's a veteran, is going to get out of position in those types of situations? It worked with Solomon Thomas, a young guy on the 49ers defensive line. Would it work with Arakpo?
Does Arakpo still wear concrete boots on his shoes?
Maybe.
He's slow now.
Yeah.
He's slow now.
So it doesn't matter which way he decides to go. You're going to beat him regardless.
No. You just run by him.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, he might make the right decision, then you just run around him.
I like that strategy.
I think that's how that goes. I think you got to get rid of the bubble screen completely. I don't want to see that ever again.
Oh, that's not going to happen.
I know. I just thought I'd throw it out there as like a wish,
Yeah.
you know?
You've been wishing that for too long. You should know by now. You should know better.
Yeah, I should know better. But I think it's really going to be a lot of slants, a lot of quick hitting stuff where you're getting your slot receivers, tight ends on their linebackers. I think that is the key to this game. And Russell Wilson's going to have the fortitude to not want to spin out of the pocket right away. He's going to have to stand in there for half a beat and deliver strikes on time and in rhythm across the middle of the field. That, to me, is the key of the game.
I think you're also going to have to capitalize on Mariota's mistakes. And one thing that we've seen, that he's not prone to a lot of mistakes, but he's been making at least one big one per game. And if the Seahawks can capitalize on that, I think that's going to be a big key, especially if that happens early. There's only one quarterback who has been less accurate than Mariota under pressure, and that's been Carson Wentz. So if you can get pressure on him, like I mentioned before, that he's one of the least pressured quarterbacks in the NFL through a couple weeks. But if you can get to him, he's only 50-50 on his throws when he's under pressure.
I forgot one other key to the game. The receivers are going to have to catch the ball.
Oh, the receivers have to. The receivers have to receive the ball and score more points.
Right. I just wanted to make sure to give that very detailed and nuanced point.
Yeah, because wide receiver, having the word receiver in the actual name of the position isn't enough.
Right. Yes.
Like, it's very different from tight end. I understand how that can be confusing, but with receiver, there should be no confusion.
There should be no confusion. No. Tackle is also another very confusing position because you can't tackle at all at tackle.
That's why every position on our offensive line are guards. That makes sense.
They thought they would guard the quarterback better?
Right, because there's no tackling the quarterback.
So really the problem with Tom Cable is a language issue.
Right.
Okay.
That's why we have four
You really
guards.
got into last podcast, Brandon. You really got into the psyche of Pete Carroll. This episode, you got into the psyche of Tom Cable.
Yeah. He does not like the name tackle. He only hires guards for the offensive line.
Wow. That just makes as much sense as what they've done this year.
That's why we've been nominated back-to-back years in the podcast, the People's Choice Podcast Awards.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that and name pronunciations. These are the things.
These are the things you get
there
on the Seahawkers podcast.
Right.
All right, Adam. Well, before we get to our guest this week, HelloFresh is sponsoring the show this week.
Absolutely, man. They were kind enough to send us both a couple samples of what they do. Basically, they send you, a box full of weekly meals. Comes with these cool recipe cards. They're like, with pictures. And I needed the pictures, trust me. For somebody like me who can't cook a lick, like to the point to where one of our good friends who taught our buddy Jared how to make pies from scratch and things like that, he literally has given up on me. He just asked me to bring bread to barbecues. And I was able to prepare these meals. It was fun.
I also had fun doing this. This was something that my wife and I did. We got 3 of the family meals. And one thing I'll say, I think that's important to know, if you have a family and it says 4 people, I have 3 young kids, all under 10. I was able to feed 5 total with the family of 4 box and have a little bit of leftover. We did burgers and everybody got a good sized burger. And I learned how to do something new. I learned how to make cheddar frico. And I guess that's where you make a little. Frico. I'm telling you how to make cheddar frico.
Okay.
Put a little pile of cheddar, you put it in the oven, and it makes like a nice little crispy piece of cheese that you can put on your burger. And it adds a little crunch to it. And see, I learned something new doing this.
That's awesome, man. So one of the things that I did, they sent me the 3 meals as well. I was gone a lot during the week. I knew I wasn't going to be able to cook them all. So I figured, what better way than to figure out kind of how other people feel about this, but to give a couple other people these meals. And so I gave the ex-wife the steak and nectarine salad. She said it was absolutely delicious, was super excited about how that turned out. I gave my neighbor, who's a total foodie, Like, that's what he does. He was a chef for years and years and years. Like, that's his thing. There was a chili recipe, came back, said it was delicious. So not just me and not just you, but some other people around us. And really, for the price, you don't have to go to the grocery store. It comes right to your door. And there's all sorts of extra goodies in the box that I haven't even gotten to, Brandon.
I know. You were excited about the ice packs that you saw as a bonus on this. But as you mentioned, less than $10 a meal if you use our promo code Hawkers30. Go to HelloFresh.com. At checkout, put in the code Hawkers30. Takes $30 off your order. And yes, you can have for less than $10 a meal. And you can have your meals planned out for you. This is one of the things that my wife and I struggle with the most during the week is meal planning. And for us last week to have 3 meals already planned out, it was great.
How many times have you looked to make like some new dish? Like I made the chicken with mushroom gravy and couscous, right? And there was a few spices that were used in there that is beyond my collection of spices, which is salt, pepper, and like garlic powder. Like I think those are the three things I have in my deal. So every time you try to make a new dish, you got to go out and buy the spice, right? To make that new dish. And that's like a $15, $25 endeavor half of the time. And then what? You use it again 5 years later and it's expired. So this is a great way to where you get to try some other tastes and flavors that you wouldn't normally do. And you get to still do it at a reasonable price.
And the meal's designed to take about 30 minutes, whether you're a novice or you're Adam's neighbor who's a foodie. So go to HelloFresh.com and at checkout, enter the promo code Hawkers30 for $30 off your first order. Let's get into our interview now with Sam Gold, founder of NFL Breakdowns and staff writer for fieldgoals.com. He's going to break down for us. Adam mentioned the bubble screen earlier, and Sam's going to explain why the Seahawks actually run that play as part of their offensive strategy, along with the zone read.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. If there's some facts, reason, and logic behind that. Good luck to you, Sam. This is going to be fun.
This week on the Seahawkers podcast, we welcome on Sam Gold of Sam's Film Room. You might see him, recognize him from Field Goals, and often puts out a lot of different videos. He looks at a lot of different teams, but for the Field Goals site, focuses on the Seahawks. And so we're interested, I know, on getting a lot of his thoughts and takes on the team through the first couple weeks. Sam, how you doing?
Well, first off, thanks for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. So before we get started, I want to make it clear to folks. Now, you're a Skins fan, but you write for Field Goals. How did this happen?
Well, that is correct. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, so I am a Washington Redskins fan. Pretty much, it was, I guess, a year ago, I was starting my hand at some YouTube film breakdowns, and I did one on Doug Baldwin, and then Kenny Arthur, who is the Field Goals managing editor, he posted it on Field Goals. And around that time, that's when Danny Kelly actually was leaving for the Ringer. Mm-hmm. So he posted the Doug Baldwin video. I sent him a personal message just thanking him for posting my video and asked, if I created a Tyler Lockett video, would he be at all interested in it? And then pretty much from there on, I started writing for Field Goals. So I mean, that's essentially kind of, I've always known about Field Goals. Pretty much anytime I kind of dabbled in Seahawks stuff, I always got good reactions from, Danny Kelly and David Sue. And then basically pretty much a lot of the fan base has been, extremely friendly, especially with the fact that they know I'm not even a fan of the Seahawks. They view it as an objective outsider's opinion, which is nice. It's good to have that versus a more of like a biased opinion.
Absolutely. We're all about having the biased opinion on our show. That's what we do. So it's good sometimes to have a little bit of balance and to see what other people think of particular players on this team. And I distinctly remember that Doug Baldwin one because just the breakdown of what special things Doug Baldwin's able to do at his position, the way you're able to point those things out, it's at a level that I think pretty much any football fan can understand.
And that's pretty much when I founded my own website, NFLbreakdowns.com, that was kind of my mission it wasn't only just let me write this so I understand it. It was let me write this also so that I can help other people understand it. Because, football gets extremely complicated. And it's one of those things that I'd rather have a very intelligent conversation with somebody like over a beer than have like a heated debate over, like what color socks Doug Baldwin should wear, or like what, or like a Russell Wilson comment. Is he, I know like the whole thing came out 2 years ago. Is he black enough?
Right.
Like that's like not the conversation I want to have.
Yeah, you want to have that discussion of what sets apart a guy like Doug Baldwin versus Paul Richardson, who, he's made some great catches too. But what are some of those distinct little things that you can see that makes Baldwin that much better? And I think you had a video on exactly that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And Doug Baldwin is honestly, he's one of my favorite receivers. He's like, if I was to model my own wide receiving game, he would be the guy that I would try to make myself be, because I'm not 6'4". I can't run a 4.4 40, but he's smaller. He's more scrappy. He works hard, and you can tell in the way he carries himself that he goes after each play like it's his last play, and that's something I've always admired about him. And that's and pretty much once I did the Doug Baldwin video, I was like, oh man, this is awesome. Maybe I really like the offense. It's actually very, very similar to the Redskins offense, especially under Jay Gruden. And it's, there was a lot of similarities, especially with, how the Seahawks were run and then how not run the Redskins are. That it was nice to see the comparisons, the contrast and the comparisons.
Well, the interesting thing now through the first couple weeks is our offense has taken a little bit of heat, Sam. I'm sure you've probably heard about it when you go and you only score a little bit over 20 points in 2 games. So now there's a lot of heat on 2 coaches in particular, our offensive coordinator, Darrell Bevell, assistant head coach and offensive line coordinator, Tom Cable. Seahawks fans are directing a lot of heat toward those 2 in particular. If I need to know from you, if I'm going to be mad at one of these coaches, it's important to me that I know which one deserves it the most.
Trying to get me in trouble already. It's a really good question, and it all comes down to who's actually designing the plays and who's actually the one that's in charge of the game plans. Mm-hmm. Now, my assumption it's Darrell Bevell, but I'm pretty sure that Tom Cable helps out, especially with the run game. And that's a pretty common system with offensive linemen or offensive line coaches, where you'll do the offensive line coaches and will help out with a lot with the run game. Then you have the offensive passing coordinator will do that. I'm pretty sure that's how the Seahawks do it. I could be wrong that they both do it together, but there's certain things that I think the blame honestly is squarely good. It goes on both, and it's unfortunate because I actually really like Darrell Bevell's system, and there's a lot to like about it with how he uses his different skill players and stuff. But it's more, I think there's a way that you can make it even better. And I feel like the team is not reaching that potential right now.
And I think that's part of the frustration of Seahawks fans, right? Is because we all see the potential. We see a guy like Jimmy Graham who's able to do amazing things. We know Russell Wilson can do some amazing things. And yet, we have pieces on the offensive line that just we're not quite seeing the improvement that we hope to see from last year to this year. Just watching it and through the first couple of weeks of the season, do you see any improvement from this team from week 1 to week 2, or improvement from last season compared to this season?
I think the big thing I saw was that they actually used read option going from week 1 to week 2.
Yeah,
and that's something that I kind of harped on when I made an offensive line run blocking video, and it was. Honestly, the adjustments that I thought they needed to make were not being made. They were lining up with heavy personnel. They were trying to jam the ball down the defense's throats, and they just couldn't do it. The Packers' defensive line just completely dominated, and it's something that you have to understand, that this line will never be good enough to physically dominate another opponent. Like if the Dallas Cowboys, for example. That's their game plan. Their game plan is to line up in 12 personnel, 13 personnel, and which is, 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends. And their goal is just to sit there and just hammer it. And that's something that the Seahawks just can't do that because they don't have the offensive line for it. So in my opinion, you can do a mixed approach. You can add misdirection. You can add read option. You can add reverses. Like look at the Rams, look at the 49ers this year with Kyle Shanahan. Their systems, they recognize their weaknesses and then they take advantage of that by using their skill players and putting them in better situations. And it's something that I always thought Darrell Bevell did actually a pretty good job of over the past couple of years, especially in his use of Doug Baldwin, especially in his use of, Tyler Lockett. I just didn't see it this year so far. And that's something that's kind of irking me, is that why, I don't know if they just thought they had enough to do more base packages, more base formations, I don't know.
Well, you talked about the read option. Adam, my co-host, he talked about running it a little bit more. What does the read option do for the what does it do for any offense, really?
The read option does a lot. It's one of those wrinkles that a lot of people actually have. Either very pro read option or you're anti read option because you think that your quarterback will get injured, and that all goes back to like, did RG3 get injured running the read option? And kind of those debates is that, does it put unnecessary hits on your quarterback? And for those that don't know, the read option is essentially you're reading the unblocked defender at the end of the line of scrimmage. So essentially, you're looking at the last defensive end and or last end man on the line of scrimmage, and you're basically saying, all right, I'm purposely not going to block him, but me as a quarterback, I can decide if I want to either hand the ball off to my running back or I can keep it depending on what he does. And so essentially, you're putting him in a situation where if he's not fast enough, you could hit the edge with someone like Russell Wilson and get out there. RG3 was great at it. Russell Wilson can do it. Cam Newton can do it. And basically, you can take advantage of him that way. If you hold him too long, you hand the ball to the running back, and he has extra room to make a cutback. So that's pretty much the benefit of it, is that you either get a bigger lane for a cutback, or you get a good gain through your quarterback keeping it. As long as he slides and protects himself or gets out of bounds, it's fine. There's no reason why it shouldn't be pretty much a staple in any shotgun inside zone based offense, and that's a lot of what the Seahawks are good at. So I'm a fan of, if you're going to run shotgun inside zone, add it every single play. Like it doesn't do anything different for me as if I was going to call the plays. I think it adds enough that you should keep it in there.
You talked about the Rams and the 49ers and having their run game and some of the things that they do. I know one of the things that we saw in the game against the 49ers, the one big play that they had running up the middle, it was a really well-designed play. And if you're watching from the back end, you see, the linebackers, KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner going to the left side. You see, as the receiver runs across the other side of the formation, you see Cam Chancellor follow him out. And then it just opens up the middle of the defense wide. And that's how the 49ers are able to get those types of big plays. We don't necessarily see that as much with the Seahawks. I feel like we saw a little bit more when we had Percy Harvin on the offense, but since then, do they have enough the right kind of personnel to be able to do those types of design plays?
See, I think so, and you're exactly right about that play, and that's that play with Carlos Hyde. That's one of the exact plays I'm referencing, and it's one of those plays that for my Wednesday film breakdown, I was actually probably going to do a Carlos Hyde film breakdown versus the Seahawks run defense, and that's pretty much the way you described it is exactly right. I mean, you have inside zone, and then you have a misdirection, a reverse, an end around on the edge to basically pull Cam Chancellor out of his design running lane. And that's something where if he is focused on the backfield, he would have ran up there and stopped that play for 3 yards. Mm-hmm. It would have been a 3 or 4 yard gain. The offense would have moved on, or the defense would have moved on to the next play. But instead, Cam Chancellor falls after that wide receiver, and then you have a wide open running lane. And that's part of it, is that you're also throwing Jeremy Lane in the box, and he gets kicked out, obviously, and it turned into a hard play, and that's something that I really want the Seahawks to do. Is that Tyler Lockett is definitely fast enough. Paul Richardson, he can probably do it too. Like he's not as good as Tyler Lockett at running those sort of end arounds and sort of screen plays, but he can still execute them. And I mean, you can also add in Doug Baldwin. So it's any three of those guys, in my opinion, could do it. What that does also is that if you can add those plays in, it adds a full set of 3 plays in it. You can either hand the ball off to the running back, you can add a read option to that with Russell Wilson, or you can just throw the instant lateral screen pass to the wide receiver. It's 3 design plays inside one play that turn that play from a 2-yard gain to a 4-yard gain on your average running play. And that's enough in the NFL to turn first downs. And that's something I wish the Seahawks would do.
Well, you pointed out one of, I think, fans' least favorite plays to see run, and that's the lateral screen pass to a wide receiver. Now, can you help explain to people why the team runs that play? Because we don't see a lot of running back screens, but we do see a lot of wide receiver screens.
So the big thing with the wide receiver screen is that your goal is to stretch the defense out. Your goal is to basically create what's called a horizontal stretch across the field. If the way you can visualize that is that this is what the Seahawks did a lot last year. You have 2 receivers standing on top of each other on opposite sides of the field, split way outside. Basically twin stacks mirrored on both sides. So you had someone like, I think it was Jermaine Kearse and Paul Richardson on one side. Then you had like Doug Baldwin and Tyler Lockett on the other side. Or maybe I'm messing up the combos.
Sure.
But that was a very, very common formation. And then basically what that did was that it set up the offense so that Russell Wilson can get to the line of scrimmage, look to the left, look to the right, and figure out based on how the defense is lining up to the team that they can throw one of those passes or they can just hand the ball off. And while a quick wide receiver screen, maybe only gains 3 yards or 2 yards, or the idea is that it's a low risk, high reward play. If you get good blocking, you get one broken tackle. The other thing is that, and Russell Wilson can definitely throw those, so that's why it's low risk. The other thing is that the defense can't then bring that other defender, that second defender, closer to the box, because Russell Wilson will throw that every single time. So while it definitely gets sometimes it gets those 2-3 yard plays, the goal is to stretch out the defense and to hold them in place so that you can get your running lanes. And that's just something that a lot of teams will sometimes run toss plays or stretch plays to the outside to set up those inside plays. This is just another one of those ways to do that for the Seahawks.
One more question before I let you go. This summer, you looked at Jimmy Graham's role with the Seahawks. What do you think about his role on the team now and how he's being used?
It's an interesting question. I haven't studied him as much this year as I did last year, looking at all his targets. I think it's clear that the Seahawks want to use him more in the red zone, which is good. I'm always a fan of that. It's clear that they're definitely looking for him in some situations. I think it's going to be a hard transition from Russell Wilson to go from, ironically, Jermaine Kearse was one of his favorite red zone targets, to basically Jimmy Graham. And it turns into a, maybe they can't score within the 5 yard line, but maybe they can score 15 to 20 yards out, where they can stretch out the defense and use their speed. And it's a very common problem, especially when you have speedy receivers. The past couple of years with, for example, the Redskins, and I'll reference them, is that they had Carson, Deshaun Jackson, and Jamison Crowder, and then they had a 6'3" Jordan Reed. And especially none of those guys were huge body guys, but they stretched out the defense in order to create those mismatches in lanes. And basically that's something that the Seahawks definitely need to do. And with Jimmy Graham, you have to use him as a baseline running in the back of the end zone type player, and that's to pull the defenses out of the way in order to set up a different player. And right now, I don't know if it's just necessarily not working or if there's another reason why they're just having such horrible problems in the red zone. I think that's partially to do with Russell Wilson. That's just what Jimmy Graham offers, is that he's a big body receiver and he can also find those gaps in coverages.
Well, Sam, I know if somebody really wants you to make a detailed breakdown of Jimmy Graham, they can go to your Patreon page.
Thank you. Yeah. So my Patreon page is patreon.com, Samuel R. Gold. Thank you. And thank you for your guys' support also. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. And where can people find you on Twitter, find your articles?
I'm at Samuel R. Gold. And then I also have the YouTube channel, Samuel Gold NFL. And then all my articles, either at NFLbreakdowns.com or on Field Goals, which the next one should be out on Wednesday.
Sam, thanks again for coming on the show. Appreciate you taking a look at the Seahawks, Field Goals, and all your work on Twitter as well. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks again to Sam Gold for coming on the show this week. And I was happy to see after this last week, looking at the all-purpose yards, we talked about how Tyler Lockett had a pretty solid game. There was nothing wrong I could see with Tyler Lockett, and he was able to be our leading receiver. And I looked over at Cooper Kupp,
wondered about that.
About 30 yards or so this last week against the Skins. So Cooper Kupp at 109 receiving yards and Tyler Lockett 216 overall. So almost doubling him up already. But even if we went off receiving yards, it's 72 to 109. And I expect Tyler's going to pass him on that side too.
I would imagine so. I mean, just working his way back in, week one, from having his leg shattered in two spots with it poking out the skin.
Compound fracture. We talked about this.
Right. And he's still whipping Cooper Kupp in your little bet right now. So that's fun.
That was not a compound dislocation that Lockett had.
No, that was the exact definition of a compound fracture. No doubt about it.
Well, quick welcome to some new members of the flock this week. Actually, no new members of the flock this week, but we got some raises from our current members of the flock.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it when the little flockers come through for us like that. That's awesome, man.
I did find out that there are people on my side on this flockers argument. So
really, who?
I'm just saying. I had some backup. I'm not going to throw my fellow non-flocker liker people under the bus.
How many? Then give me a number.
At least one. Just saying, I had some support.
Far more enjoy it. I think.
I think
that's a 10-to-1 ratio.
I want to say 2, but I know at least 1.
I'm sure you want to say 2. Yeah.
So, quick thanks to Jake Burdine for a bunch of free Facebook advertising. That was cool.
Yes,
donated
that was super cool
to help boost our Facebook page up a little bit.
Made a huge difference.
It did. And Jake Harris for giving us a raise. So, big week for the Jakes.
Yeah, the Jakes unite, apparently.
Yeah, Jake raised up to the $5 level and sent in a note to talk about how he became a Seahawks fan. He said, growing up a skater kid, I never gave any time of day to team sports. No immediate family members of mine were into sports of any kind either. No, I came from a family of hippies. At some point during my high school days, a buddy left his video game console at my house for an extended period of time, along with the Madden, unsure of the year, the Madden video game. I eventually got bored enough one day to give it a try and discovered very quickly how it's played and found brilliance in the game of football. I will never forget the moment I decided to put my focus on our Seattle Seahawks as the team I root for. Standing on my back patio with my Raiders fan of a roommate and Broncos fan coworker, they argued between each other as to why I should get on board and rooting for their favorite teams. Didn't take me long to realize my heart wasn't with either team they were pushing on me. I began thinking of their own home connections to their respected teams, and the day I sat and watched the Seahawks face the Steelers in Super Bowl 40, I had no connection to the team beside the state I lived in, but I remembered not feeling good about the fact they lost the game. I wanted them to win. I had no inclination going into it, but by the end of the game, I was absolutely disappointed by the outcome. Fast forward 6 or so years, I decided to pipe up and tell my roommate and coworker, in that moment, I'm going to say, catfish both your teams. The Seahawks have won 2 preseason games, and I'm going to begin a bandwagony fandom. I might as well do it with the only team in the state in which I grew up. I became emotional about it. I got invested. I realized that the culture within the Seahawks organization is different than any other. And we went and brought the Lombardi Trophy to Seattle for the first time in franchise history. I can go into so many details about my experience throughout that season, but I will refrain for the sake of keeping this as short as possible. As a Greenhorn bandwagon fan, I did my best to stay humble and kept expectations to a minimum. But they went ahead and delivered a magical season that stole my damn heart. And I realized quickly that through thick or thin, this is my team. And I've since come to love Washington sports all around. I found great satisfaction in seeing the Huskies go as far as they did last season as well. Also wishing for the best for the Cougs, Zags, and Mariners. And even, yes, Eastern Washington as well. But let's be honest. Let's be honest. Red turf? Come on, man. I can't even look at it.
Now. It's like pink now. It's like faded.
Ew.
It's gross.
That's gross.
Yeah.
All of that, I suppose, just leads me to my gratitude for y'all's podcast. Discovered it about halfway through the 2013 season and found an instant relation with the way I began viewing and supporting the team. It's become my weekly go-to podcast since. I listen to many podcasts of various subjects. It's my go-to podcast since the first episode that I listened to. Nice to hear you guys express and to depict the team in the way I view it as well. Keep up the good work, fellas. I know you will. I felt inclined to up my pledge today and finally review on iTunes and tell y'all my story. Not much left to say, except go Hawks. Much love, Jake Harris.
All right, go Hawks, Jake. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's funny how we all find our fandoms in different ways. I mean, Super Bowl 40, like that's a tough way to find your fandom.
I know. The Super Bowl 49. Tough way to find your fandom.
Yeah, but it was kind of like black tie. from the NFL or from Dave Damashek's podcast, the producer there, TD. He found his fandom in the loss to the Patriots.
Right.
So that's how you know you're a true fan. So appreciate the raise, dude, and thanks for tuning in. I think the only reason it's probably a go-to is the subject matter helps.
Right.
It makes it a lot easier to be the go-to.
Well, and a congrats to Jake, too, for being our week 1 winner in our Patreon Pick'em League.
All right, that's too much good fortune for him. No, not congrats.
No. Okay. 160 points. He was the lone person on the top. I didn't even have to go to the tiebreakers last week. So congrats, even with the scoring issues, which I've gotten the email now from NFL.com saying the scoring issues have all been cleared up now. And so I think we're okay to actually pick winners. So double check, make sure your score is good. But I've noticed that my week 1 score went up 10 points, and I needed that 10 points. So I think it's all worked out.
I don't think mine went up 10 points. This is
Catfish!
It's a bunch of crap.
But yes, congrats to Jake.
Sounds like it's rigged. This is a conspiracy.
It's rigged. Hey,
somebody call Alex Jones. This is a conspiracy.
This is a conspiracy.
The lizard people are behind this.
That's actually a really good point.
Yes,
we need to be on this.
Right.
All right. Well, moving on. Another raise from Jeannie Bowen, longtime listener and member of the flock. She's been with us a while. She says, give me a raise for general awesomeness, but especially for the direct way you addressed racial justice issues in the last pod. I understand people wanting to have their escapes like sports, but if we can't talk about or even listen to different perspectives on issues, what kind of hope is there for our country? I appreciate you guys for your willingness to talk about these issues when they come up. I hope you will continue to do so. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And, we actually had a few people reach out with some kind words regarding that conversation. And, I appreciate that from all of you. We just did our best, and hopefully it seems to strike a chord in the way that we had hoped.
Yes, it did. And also thanks to James McCarthy. James upped his pledge from $1 to $3, so he wants to get in the Pick'em League.
All right.
I'll have to send James the info here shortly. Getintheflock.com if you want to be a member of our flock, and $3
if you're a member of the flock, are you a little flocker?
If you want to be, you could wear that badge. It's an optional badge. I'm not going to say it's mandatory, but Adam,
there's been a request for stickers.
I did see the request for stickers.
Yeah, that says I'm a little flocker.
I think maybe it should be like one of those pins, like a campaign pin.
Oh, that's cool too.
Yeah.
I'd be down for that. Yeah, it'd be good on a hat.
Or a patch. I know I've talked to Young Choi about getting us, the jersey patches.
Yeah, I'm not really into the patches. I don't need those stinking patches.
But getintheflock.com if you want to be a member of our flock. $3 a month gets you into our patron Pick'em League, where we have weekly prizes like Jake just won. I don't think he's going to appreciate the extra competition.
Maybe it won't bother him.
It
Maybe
might
he's
not.
like, screw it.
It shouldn't. The extra competition should be welcomed.
Yeah, always compete.
Exactly. Well, Adam, what do you say we get into some do better and better at life?
All right, man. Who you got for do better?
My do better this week is for the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Oh.
And them releasing their class of 2018 here a week or so ago, last Tuesday. And for throwing me off, because when I saw one name in particular on this Hall of Fame list, I thought, all right, I'm fired up about this guy getting his opportunity. And that guy is none other than Steve Smith. The only problem is it's not the Steve Smith. It's the other Steve Smith.
Like Giant Steve Smith?
Giant Steve Smith is on the list of 108 nominees for the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2018 class. And if you follow football at all, there's only one Steve Smith that even belongs in the conversation. And apparently he was only nominated because somebody made a mistake.
Right.
And it just so happened that even though they made that mistake, he still met the minimum criteria because he had played for 5 years and he was voted to at least a Pro Bowl or an All-Pro team.
Wow. Who knew?
Yeah, Steve Smith of the Giants, nominated by a fan through the NFL fan voting site. And part of the problem was it initially featured a photo of the wrong Steve Smith. They featured a photo of Steve Smith who played for the Panthers and Ravens, which added to all the confusion here.
Wow.
So Steve Smith of the Giants ends up getting nominated among the 108 modern era nominees because of this mistake. I really liked the CBS Sports article that talked about this because they referred to real Steve Smith and other Steve Smith as if like the Giants receiver is a traitor to the Steve Smith name.
Right.
I thought that was funny.
He's an imposter.
Imposter Steve Smith.
Yeah.
How dare he? How dare he share his name? And how dare the NFL for putting up the wrong photo and creating this whole situation that should have been avoided. A lot of confusion because Steve Smith of the Giants, I'm sorry, dude, you're not a Hall of Famer, but at least you could be a little bit excited about being on the 2018 list. And for the NFL for allowing this to happen, do better.
Do better, man. Yeah, that was always a tricky deal with all the Steve Smiths.
Yeah.
So if you have a generic last name and you're having a kid, go with like DeBrickashaw or something with some flair. You know, you can't go with Steve when you're naming your kid.
No, don't do it. Apologies to all the Steves out there. Sorry, Adam thinks your name's boring.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, if you're Steve, like, I don't know, pick an exotic last name, of any kind. Like,
so you can only pair the name Steve with somebody who has you can't be Steve Johnson, you can't be Steve Wilson, can't be Steve Smith. You have to be Steve and something, a less common last name.
Right. Just like if you have like a really long last name, don't give your kid like some extremely long first name.
Mm-hmm.
Like now you're just making his life. You know how many like years of his life that you'll waste for him as they have to sign everything throughout their lifetime. How many extra seconds every time to like sign that big long name?
The SAT tests and any standardized tests that they have to take through school.
Every check, every form, I mean, so there's a lot of things here you got to think about, you know, when it comes to these sort of issues.
I could see that you've put some thought into this
just now. All right. Well, somebody that didn't put much thought into anything is Scott Polacek, however you say his name. See, there you go. Polacek is, not super common. Scott Common. That works for his name.
It works.
Yeah. But what didn't work is his article on Bleacher Report, considering the headline in and of itself.
Does it have a fire emoji in it?
No, it had legal action in it.
Oh, well, it's better at life for not putting a fire emoji in a Bleacher Report headline.
You should light this on fire because this article's garbage. Russell Wilson sued by former employees over bread ball business.
What?
I see that, and I'm like, what the hell? Russell Wilson's getting sued from former employees? Like, what did he do? Like, he seems like a stand-up guy. Like, there's no way that, like, he would have screwed people over, like that just doesn't seem to like add up, So I clicked on the article.
Well, now, did you say bread ball or bread bowl?
No, bread ball business. Okay.
I don't even know what this is.
So apparently there is a bread making company called Eat the Ball. And
it's like when we were kids and you take a piece of white bread and ball it up into like one little piece of dough and put it in your mouth.
They made breads in the shape of footballs, basketballs, and more. Like that was the construct of the business. Now, right there, like between the name of the business and just the overall idea of this business, that sounds like failure out of the gate.
I don't know. Like, I'm kind of on board because this is maybe like pretzel bites.
It's not like pretzel bites. It's just bread in the shape of a ball. Okay, and then it's named Eat the Ball. I don't want to eat the ball. And on top of that, Russell Wilson shouldn't be eating the ball. He should be throwing the ball. You don't want him eating the ball.
See, I think where my interest in this hinges on the size of the ball. Like if they're bite size, I'm in. But if it's a football sized bread shaped ball, then I'm totally out.
It makes no reference to the size of the ball, only the shape of the ball.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm glad we got that out of the way. Which, again, that detail is about as inane as Russell Wilson's involvement with this entire thing. Apparently, 2 employees are suing the company because they claim they haven't been paid a couple times since July, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the minority owners of the company is Russell Wilson. So he probably wrote a check to this company at one point. I'm sure he has zero involvement with their day-to-day operations or advising them to the size of the balls that they need to bake or the shape of the balls or anything to do with the balls, who gets paid for the balls. I'm sure Russell Wilson has zero involvement in that. And they decided to make the headline about how Russell Wilson is getting sued over this. It's absolutely absurd. So for trying to take a story that's not a story and turn it into a story, Scott, whatever your last name is, that's not generic, so I can't remember it, do better.
I think Russell Wilson does need to take some ownership in this do better, though, because somebody had to come to him and say, Russ, we got this idea. How about bread in the shape of footballs? And he said, I'm in.
Or it's like a friend of his, like, that's really into this business idea. He's like, dude, Russ, hook a brother up. Can you hook me up with 10 grand?
No, you got to shut him down. You say that's a dumbass idea and I'm not giving you any money.
You want to know how I know this business failed or is going to fail? Like, this is real simple to me. The two employees that are suing, the managing director was getting paid $170,000. And the other employee that says that they weren't getting paid was making $85,000 from a bakery. You know who works at bakeries? Poor people. Bakeries aren't like traditionally known as, like, it's not Wall Street. It's not like you open a hedge fund, and you're making bank. You're making bread balls and you're pulling down 170 a year. That thing was doomed from the start.
There's only one food that works in football shape form, and that's chocolate. Chocolate works in football shapes.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. It seems like there's got to be some other ones out there, like Cheez-Its in the side. No, no, you're
only
out?
Squares.
I'm more into salty balls. So I don't know.
I bet you are.
Yeah. All right.
Who you got for Better at Life this week?
All right. My Better at Life this week is for former Seattle Seahawk Golden Tate, because Golden Tate shut down a dude on Twitter. Apparently they had a beef.
Hey, before you get to this beef on Twitter,
yeah,
I have a beef with Golden Tate because I lost this week in my fantasy team because Golden Tate and Matt Stafford did not combine.
Is your name Jamison Kendall?
Why do you ask?
Oh, I'll let you know here in a second. Continue.
Just saying. Matt Stafford and Golden Tate could have done a little bit more to help me out on my fantasy team this week.
Well, apparently Jamison Kendall, at Jakendall7, look him up, tweets at Golden Tate, at Showtime Tate. I needed 9 points going into this game, and you only got 6.5. You are no longer my favorite cereal or my wide receiver one. I'm not sure what that has to do with cereal. I mean, like Golden Grahams? Like, is that what he's going after or something like that? Or is there a Golden Tate cereal?
Well, Doug Baldwin has his own cereal now, so I don't see why Golden Tate can't have his.
Oh, maybe he does. But anyways, Golden Tate had an amazing response to this, because this is the exact response every person that catfish about fantasy ought to get when they catfish about fantasy. Dear Jameson, this is the real world, and the Lions won. That's all that matters. Have a great night. Sincerely, Golden. Exactly. Thank you, Golden Tate, for upholding reality and putting down fantasy. I appreciate it. Golden Tate, better at life than Skip Bayless.
Well, now I know for sure David Wesley, if he gives us another chance on this show, he's
don't care. I'm not changing. That's football related.
That's and part of the core of who you are. You can't change that.
Right. Hey, I got a question though.
That wasn't me.
At this point in Golden Tate's career, do you think of him more as a Seahawk or more of a Detroit Lion? Now that he's been in both places almost the same amount of time.
Oh, that's interesting, because Steve Hutchinson, do you think of him? Now he played for 3 different teams.
Right. I think of him as a Viking primarily.
I think of him as a Viking because of the way he left Seattle. Mm-hmm. But he said here recently that if he goes into the Hall of Fame, he's going in considering himself a Seahawk.
Wonderful. Well, that's great. I don't know, but that's just where my head was at. I'm asking about Golden though. What do you think about him now? Because I honestly think of him more as a Lion now.
I do think of him more of as...
Maybe it's recency bias. I don't know.
I think it's recency bias because, even when it gets to the end of his career, I tend to think of players where they spent more time toward the later part of their career than the end.
I don't know.
If it's half and half, I tend to go with the half that was later on in their career.
Okay.
So even with Steve Smith, I definitely don't think of Steve Smith as being, a Raven. I always think of him as a Panther.
Yeah.
Because he didn't play long enough post Panthers. But Golden Tate he's starting to get to that area where I just think of him as a member of the Lions now.
Yeah, me too. Made me a little sad.
Oh, it is sad.
It's the reality of the situation, though.
Well, he can come back.
Yeah, he can.
We'll take him back.
Who you kicking off the roster?
McAvoy after his 2 drops.
Okay, fair enough. Plus, he'd make that bubble screen go.
He would. I know for sure. My Better at Life this week is for Seahawks owner Paul Allen.
Oh, okay.
And he was recognized this last week for his 20 years of ownership of the Seahawks. That's been a little over 20 years, but this was kind of the celebration week with the first game at home at CenturyLink Field, and Paul Allen was recognized at the stadium on Q13 Fox. They aired a documentary of Paul Allen's ownership. It was a nice 30-minute program on what he's meant for this team, just how it happened that he came to be the owner of the team after Ken Behring was threatening to move this team down to LA, and the moving trucks, they were on their way out, and they were able to make this work for the Seahawks to stay in Seattle. And so I know as Seahawks fans, we all feel we owe a debt of gratitude for Paul Allen to be there to purchase the team, for helping get the vote out that allowed the Seahawks to stay in Seattle, part of that Proposition 48. And so Paul Allen, 20 years of ownership for the Seahawks. Better at life than Skip Bayless. Referendum 48. Referendum 48, and they go on to win Super Bowl 48. How about that?
Numerology.
Uh-huh.
There you go. That has to mean something.
It means something to me.
I hope that doesn't mean that we have to wait another 48 years for a championship.
No. No, I hope not.
Or 48 years for a left tackle.
Yeah.
All I know is that this podcast went a lot longer than 48 minutes.
Uh-huh.
But if you did not get enough Seahawks talk here today, make sure to read Clinton Bonner's 3 In, 3 Out on SeahawkersPodcast.com. Always some great insights, some great pop culture references. It's a lot of fun. It's a great read. I'm sure that'll be up here shortly.
And with that,
there's only one thing left to say.
go Hawks.
Go Hawks.